letting go of control, whether this is in business, self-image, or parenthood. And as you know, even though children do grow up, even if you don't have biological children on your own, you're always parenting your inner child, and you're always responsible for honoring your emotions. And in the context of letting go of control, what is so interesting is that I just finished recording this podcast and the audio wasn't recorded. So I had to ask myself, am I controlling if I record this podcast again? Or am I surrendering that even though in my mind the first version was exquisite? As long as it is authentic and I'm surrendering to that authentic unraveling, it's going to be for the highest good. And this is a form of surrender, this is a form of letting go of control, because interestingly enough, in the first version of this podcast, I was specifically addressing letting go of perfectionism and letting go of that very common high achieving wound of organizing everything and having that meticulous discipline. And the truth is that life is usually non-linear, messy, and more often than not, way more different than what we have imagined. So that art of letting go of control fully allows us to harness the present moment and to bask in the present moment. Not only that, in this podcast, I'm going to give you a gender reveal of our baby, and it is actually tied to letting go of control and parenthood. So stay tuned for that. This is Anna Maria. I am the founder of Voda Coaching International and the Legacy Leaders Movement. It is for those of us who are revolutionary, trailblazers, legacy leaders by design. We weren't born to conform. We were born to shape the world with our original ideas. And this is why your voice gets amplified when you let go of control, letting go of controlling the narrative, letting go of controlling how people perceive you, what people think of you, and even letting go of that frustration when as with my example, I recorded this beautiful first podcast where words were flowing from my mouth, and then I was like, oh, a moment of frustration. And this is why I am recording this podcast again, because life is not perfect. It's not perfect. Sometimes technical things happen. Sometimes we get frustrated. Sometimes we're challenged. Sometimes we have to really face that discomfort and understand from where the discomfort is coming from, because there are two types of discomfort. The one discomfort is when we're going against the current. This is when we're actually exploiting control, when we're trying to play God and manipulate our reality. And the other discomfort is when we are just doing something that feels challenging, but we know that eventually it's going to result in something way more rewarding than the initial effort, as with pregnancy, because pregnancy is such a great example of so much discomfort that we women forget, of course, eventually, because it is for the highest good. It is for raising a healthy human child. And again, speaking of the gender reveal, this is super interesting because it is the ultimate story of letting go of control and really surrendering to God's plan. Because again, for those of you who are parents, or even if you're not parents, children are always mirrors of where are we holding back from something. And as I keep saying, even if you don't have biological children of your own, you're always parenting your inner child. And this is why I think it's so important that we do to the best of our ability to heal, to the best of our ability, ancestral wounds, so that we cut the cycle instead of passing karmic wounds to our children. And in the context of your business being your child, is the same thing. You can only take other people as high as you're willing to go yourself. So this is why when we talk about legacy, whether it is legacy through parenthood or legacy through running a business, you are responsible for your voice, for your message, for your example, and for owning your complexity, owning your humanity, owning that you mess up, whether as a parent or as a human being. And when I work with clients, sometimes they tell me, Anna Maria, I worry that I said something and I messed up my child. Well, children are not going to get messed up just because you made a mistake. It's how you handle it. As with everything, whether you're speaking to a child or to an adult, communication is a two-way street. Communication is a form of exchange. It is about listening. It is about understanding from where the other person is coming from, and trusting that, sure, you can never go in the past, back to the past and change what you have said or you have done, but you can always own the lesson in the present moment. You can always choose to evolve, whether it is with parenthood, business, or any other direction. So as we are diving into today's podcast, letting go of control, and as I mentioned, I want to touch on letting go of controlling our self-image. And I want to give you a parallel between pregnancy and letting go of control, because even if you are a guy watching this, this is going to be very relatable, because many of us, like I said, former high achievers, former perfectionists, we have been, especially men, we have been trained, especially by popular personal development trends, to push hard and to have rock hard discipline, to wake up at 5 a.m., to do cryotherapy, cold plunges, running and eating healthy and all these things. And there comes a point when the healthy stimulation, the healthy benefits, the healthy motivation is actually replaced by controlling your body, controlling your diet, controlling how you live life. And it's so paradoxical, because all of these trends that I'm also very much into health and fitness. However, when we remove the trend from the intention, the intention is to be healthy. The intention is to take care of your body. The intention is to do your best. However, when this gets extreme, it becomes control. And then you start to think that if you don't look a certain way, you are not good enough. And I speak from experience, because I had an eating disorder in my teens up until my 20s. I had a severe body dysmorphia, and I didn't like the way I looked at all, which was, of course, was tied to a childhood trauma linked to my father and the things I had to process in myself. And this self-worth wound shows up so often with my clients, whether they are women or men, because again, society gives you that overly curated image, whether it is of social media, of your Instagram, of your LinkedIn, of your body when you look at yourself in the mirror. And like I said, we take something that is so important as taking care of your health, and then we take it to an extreme, where it actually starts to become self-punishing instead of self-empowering. And the parallel between pregnancy and letting go of control is because people would ask me often, well intended, of course, they would ask me, Anna Maria, how are you feeling? And of course, my first dominant emotion is that I feel really good, and I feel very grateful, and I feel very excited to have that privilege to be raising a healthy baby. And of course, I'm euphoric. However, there is also another part of pregnancy that is challenging for some of us who are more accustomed to be more, how to put it? Again, the word control comes in. Like, not that I was obsessed with my self-image recently. I used to. I was totally obsessed with my self-image. However, over the last couple of years, I really released that, and I really leaned into taking care of myself with love and self-approval and self-care and self-love. So this is why it was very surprising to me and very humbling when in the first weeks of pregnancy, when I started to, of course, change my body and to change my eating habits and change my routine with working out. Just to give you an example, I used to naturally do intermittent fasting for years, wake up very early, exercise, boom, 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 super highly productive. This was natural to me. I wasn't forcing it. So it was very humbling to see how my divine feminine energy took over. And she told me, Anna Maria, you have to slow down. You really have to stay in bed longer, sleep more, really enjoy your mornings, don't rush, have breakfast, do a low impact workout instead of your usual high endurance routine. And I'm giving you this example because even though it sounds like the most trivial thing for some women, I'm sure, to let go of your usual working out regime, but I tend to think that it's not just me. I tend to think that there are many women who also are experiencing something similar, when of course you're super grateful for the experience, but there is a part of you that is freaking out, that you're just not in control of your time, of your energy. And I'm sure this is only going to develop further in parenthood. And this is why I'm talking about this today, because me being so cognizant about it, instead of suppressing it, instead of shrinking it, instead of telling myself that I shouldn't feel this way, I'm like, I am going to feel it. I'm going to feel it all. I'm going to feel all of my emotions, honor my emotions, and really understand from where are they coming from, because it is a form of control, to control our emotions, to tell ourselves you're only allowed to feel this, and if you're feeling this, there is something wrong with you. And the very first thing I tell my clients is that we are multidimensional beings. We must honor our inner paradox, which means that we are absolutely in our divine birthright to be complex, because very often when we feel elated, inspired, excited, motivated, it's the heart. And then when we start to worry and panic and have anxiety and worries, this is the brain processing past experiences, masking these experiences as real. So once you understand how the brain works, once you fully understand that your brain is sometimes challenging you to let go of overthinking, this is another form of letting go of control. This is why I often tell my clients that it's one thing to understand something intellectually, because all of us, I'm sure, are highly self-taught, educated, we have read many books and things like that. But then there comes a point when more knowledge is only creating noise, actually. It's not helping you. So it's actually about slowing down and getting back in your body, getting back in your sovereignty, getting back in your intuitive analysis of what is happening. And the intuitive analysis of letting go of control actually suggests what I told you in the beginning of this video, when the first recording didn't work. And I had to actually use my intuitive analysis to ask myself, am I pushing it? Am I pushing it if I film it again? And I took a moment to really feel it. And then I told myself, how would I feel if I don't publish this podcast today? And the truth is that I really feel that urgency to talk about this today. And usually when I have an urgency to talk about something, it means that my story is relevant to someone. And again, speaking of legacy and leadership and visibility, our stories is how we connect to others. Our stories shift humanity, because when you have the bravery to talk about something that feels awkward, maybe embarrassing, maybe challenging, frustrating, however you want to call it, this gives the courage to someone else to also own their complexity and their multidimensional being. Not only that, many of my clients are former perfectionists, and I know that me sharing that the first podcast didn't work out and I'm filming it again is another form of subconscious self-permission to know that sometimes things don't work out. So it's a form of intuitive analysis. Are you going to throw the baby with the water, metaphorically? Or are you going to be like, okay, if I have that inner commitment to do something, I'm going to do it, even if there is a technical mishap, if that's the word, hiccup. And it's so interesting again with that energy of just surrendering, because as I mentioned to you, in my opinion, the first podcast was just fluid. Like I said, everything was flowing and my words were just hitting, and I was like, this was such a great podcast. But then this is exactly why I'm filming this again, because I'm aware of the ego, that the first podcast was just top notch, and this podcast is a little bit messier because I don't want to repeat myself. This is one of the things that just go against my nature. And in the first version of this podcast, in my opinion, I was talking about brilliant things, and I don't want to repeat myself. And this is again such an interesting humoristic story, how sometimes we just have to surrender to trusting that if God, the divine, wants us to do something, there is a meaning behind it. Maybe my frustration now is exactly how this podcast should be, to show you that you show up. Because just like with parenthood, you learn that children have their own pace. They sometimes work slower. Sometimes they really want to sit down and eat their breakfast very slowly. And this in itself is such a huge lesson for me. I cannot put it in words enough to stress how life-changing this experience is, because in the past I was just boom, 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 boom with my schedule. For example, okay, I'm filming a podcast, I have 30 minutes, then I'm doing this, then I'm doing this, then I'm doing this. And now with pregnancy, with this rising of the divine feminine energy, I'm allowing myself to be more fluid. So filming this podcast, again, of course, requires more time. And I'm honoring that process. I'm honoring the process of slowing down. And how is it tied to you? How is it relevant to you? A great question. It is relevant to you because we're so heavily conditioned that time is always running out, that we don't have enough time, that there is so much going on. We're always busy, we're always working, we're always grinding, we're always pushing. And what if there is a different way? What if this is another thing you must let go of? You must let go of that constant voice in your head that tells you, I don't have time, I'm so busy, I'm so busy, I'm so busy. What if you can adopt the European lifestyle where you actually sit down and enjoy dinner, enjoy a lunch, enjoy that you can actually take a day off and fully bask in the present moment. This is a form of letting go of control. And what I'm going with this podcast is how we constantly create our own reality. We constantly create our own reality. That version of you that is attached to outcomes, that is attached to how people perceive you, that is attached to knowing everything in advance, is actually holding you back. Because the moment we get in this energy of I must know before I know, you get in the head, and then you block God and the divine to actually step in and show you that there is a different way, which is again why I'm recording this podcast again, because I'm choosing to believe that this version, even though intellectually I don't agree, however emotionally I trust that this version is quote unquote better because it's even more spontaneous, if you wish. So it's these life moments when we just allow ourselves to trust that our version of reality, when it's like super curated and everything is perfect, perhaps is not what we were meant to experience. Perhaps we were indeed meant to experience the messiness and things being imperfect and things just going in the wrong direction, which actually is tied to one of the things I wanted to tell you with the gender reveal, because this is the most massive lesson for me on letting go of control. Because for the 12 weeks of my pregnancy, I lived with this conviction that we are expecting a baby girl, and even I had visions with the girl. I had the name of a girl that came to me, and my husband also expected the girl. And my intuition, my spiritual gift, one of my spiritual gifts is claircognizance. So I'm usually 99.9% spot on. It's super, super rare for me to be off with my intuition. And this goes to show that perhaps it wasn't my intuition, but let's not put the cart in front of the horse. I think you're already guessing that the gender reveal of the baby is a boy, and of course I'm super excited and elated today. However, yesterday I was in a form of a shock because I was so certain it was a girl, and then I was like, no way, it's impossible. I was in a self-denial, and then of course I surrendered to the baby being a boy, and really tapping into this energy. However, the very first thing that came to me was, I cannot relate to boys. This was my first reaction. I was freaking out that I'm going to suck up as a parent, which is so not true. I tend to think that I'm a very nurturing person and I'm going to be a great mother. But this goes to show that sometimes the inner critic comes in, and then we tell ourselves things that are not true. And then I relaxed, then I surrendered, and then I told myself, Anna Maria, actually, in your coaching, which is a fact, most of your clients are men. It has always been this way. I have always had a lot of clients, men, in my private practice, because men tend to feel trust. They confide in me, they speak their hearts, they share their truth, they share their vulnerable side. And then I was like, oh wow, actually I relate to men extremely well. In fact, a lot of my male clients tell me how much they appreciate that I am very much in the feminine and also in the masculine. And I was like, hello, I could actually be a great mother for a boy. And this is tied to letting go of control, because it was that expectation I had. And when I really started to lean into my intuition, I realized that I have done so much healing of the feminine energy in my family. And when it comes to the masculine energy, of course, my relationship with my father and the masculine energy in general. And I was like, maybe that's exactly why I am given that gift of raising a conscious boy, to really raise a man who is going to be an example of a conscious leadership through the masculine energy. And this actually gave me a lot of excitement. Not to mention that actually, for the first time, like I said, my husband and I we were only talking about having one child. And then yesterday I was like, what if both of us seeing a girl is not just a fragment of our imagination? What if she actually exists in the ether? What if she is also meant to be born? Is it all a hypothesis? Of course it is. However, for those of you who are attuned to me, you know that when you feel something, it's not in your head. It's something you just feel. And trust me, some people, I have friends, even to this day, I have one friend from high school, and I really value that she's in my life for that reason, because she has always been an antagonist. She's very in her head, and very often she dismisses my intuitive nudges. And this is why I maintain a friendship with her, because she constantly reminds me where haven't I fully owned my truth, because she constantly tells me that I am being ludicrous. Anyhow, I'm sure you have friends like that. And as I tell my clients, we cannot cut off everyone from our lives who is not at our wavelength, because it means that you're not allowing yourself to address some triggers, okay? Some relationships are meant to be challenging, because they always show us where we haven't fully owned our inner conviction of who we are. And it's very individual, it's very intuitive, because for the most part, I highly recommend that you practice healthy boundaries, and you surround yourself with people who uplift you by all means, as long as you do not hide from relationships that were meant to challenge you, because this is also very healthy. And speaking of parenthood, this is also how you raise your children to be there in the world. If you only tell them to play with kids who share their interests, you are depriving them of that opportunity to have healthy conflicts, even have moments of arguing without getting volatile and things like that. And anyhow, going back to the present moment, with that self-acceptance of my truth, I know what I feel, and I definitely feel a girl. And my husband and I were talking about it, and we were like, what if we have a second child? Which was actually not in our plans at all to begin with. And the reason I'm telling you this is because, are we going to have a second child? Of course we don't know that. Let's first give birth to this beautiful child that we're currently raising. And this in itself is such a great example of letting go of control, because when I share with my friend what I'm experiencing, she actually ironically used the same words. She said, Anna Maria, you are trying to control destiny. And because I felt triggered by her comments, I was like, okay, maybe she's right. If I feel triggered, there is something she said that might be true. And then I was like, am I trying to control destiny here if we have a second child? And again, I tapped to my body, I tapped to my energy, and I was like, I am only going to be controlling destiny if I believe that we have to have a second child. If we don't have a second child, it's the end of the world, and getting obsessed with this having a child. And instead, what I'm going to do is just surrender to raising our beautiful baby boy. And if there is a second child that is supposed to come, she's going to come, or he's going to come, and we're going to have a second boy. And like I said, this story is very profound for me, because it's so much more than what I'm telling you. It's such a great example of really asking ourselves, so what is controlling and what is surrendering? Because I know that for me in this specific situation, surrendering is surrendering that we're not having a girl, we're having a boy, and fully, of course, loving him with my full heart, creating an opportunity for a second child, and just trusting the divine that if we were meant to have a second child, we're going to have a second child, and not interfering in the process. And interestingly enough, even with our child now, I know that the child really wanted to be born. This was just an inner voice that I had, that this child wanted to be born. And how is it tied to business and legacy? And those of you who are men, it is still very much tied to business and legacy, because very often we are faced with these difficult decisions when something is what we thought we wanted, something that we have believed in, and we thought this is it, this is what I want to do, but then life takes over, and then you're like, okay, maybe there is something bigger for me. Because again, to use this example, and I really want you to hear me, that this is a speculation. I don't know if we're going to have a second child or not, but us being given a boy as a child, for the first time, this opened my consciousness that we can actually have a second child. And if that was to happen, I'll be like, oh wow, now I totally see why I was feeling a girl and why we're having a boy and then eventually a girl. But again, it's totally just a fragment of possibilities, as with everything. But the bottom line is that everything in life is a possibility. There are multiple possibilities happening every single day about everything. Everything is a quantum possibility until it becomes your reality. And let this be my message for you with this podcast, to just allow things to happen, to of course have a very crystal clear vision. It's super important to have a vision, because if you're not, in my opinion, just going through life without a direction. So definitely have a vision, definitely have a very specific vision, in fact, for what you want, for your business, for your impact, for your legacy. Even it's totally okay to even imagine how you want to look. That's totally okay, as long as this self-image doesn't become obsessive. And then letting God. So if I am to summarize this podcast with this message, it is that divine reminder to trust God, that we are not God. We are made of, God is within us, but we are not God. And doesn't matter how powerful we are, we're not God. God is superior. God always has a divine plan. And it's again one of these things that have almost become trivial, almost have become cliches. And yet it is so profound to really feel that energy of, wow, yes, God always has a plan. And whatever is happening for you, perhaps you're going through a job change, you're starting a new business, you just made a huge financial investment, you are changing your marketing, perhaps for the first time you are starting your own podcast, you are raising a child. There's so many ways for you to receive this message. As long as you receive this message with this awakening of your intuitive analysis, as I said, to really be in your heart, be in your body, and know that as long as you trust and you stop interfering with the divine plan, because very often we interfere, we pout, we get angry, we start throwing tantrums, we start getting confused and getting agitated. What if our response could be, I'm trusting. I'm trusting that this is not meant to break me, this is meant to empower me. This is not meant to challenge me, it is meant to teach me. It is not meant to shrink me, it is meant to empower me to speak my voice. And as we are finishing this podcast, I would love to hear from you. How is it resonating with you? My biggest reward is hearing from you. And I would really love it if you tell me in the chat what spoke to your heart, and if you give me one example, how are you going to relate it to your lives? I would super appreciate that. And also, if you found my story relevant to you in any way, I would love for you to share it on your social media so that someone else can get inspired. And if you feel inspired to connect to other visionaries, there are so many possibilities. We have Energy Alchemy, which is a community-based program with angelic transmissions. We meet every Monday and we start the week empowered and connected to our hearts. I also have my Legacy Leaders Lineage program, one-on-one, my mastermind. Legacy Parents is coming up soon. If you're curious, you can ask me in the chat. And also my book is coming up soon, the Legacy Codex for Visionaries. I'm super excited about that. And as we finish, if you loved this podcast, if it challenged your thinking, if it propped your awareness, if it gave you an insight, I would love for you to share, to like, subscribe, and remember that your voice is your transmission. So after this podcast, after you share it with someone else, my assignment is to share something that you are taking from it. Share a quote, share an image with your own take on it, share your own voice, go live on social media, do something that is giving you that space to take what you took from this podcast with your own spin and share a message that is your message, because your message is your legacy. I send you so much love, and I'm looking forward to seeing you very soon. If you have any suggestions for topics, please share them in the chat, and I am so honored to have shared this sacred space with you. I'm going to see you very soon.